December 4th, 1872. Atlantic Ocean, 400 miles east of the Azores. 1 p.m., the Canadian brigantine Dei Gratia cuts through the waters, heading toward the Strait of Gibraltar. Captain David Reed Morehouse scans the horizon, as he's done 1,000 times before. Routine, safe. But this afternoon is different. In the distance, he spots a ship, moving erratically, zigzagging without purpose. Morehouse raises his spyglass and studies the vessel. He recognizes it immediately. It's the Mary Celeste, an American brigantine he knows well. He'd dined with its captain just weeks before in New York Harbor. Something is terribly wrong. The ship is sailing without direction. No one is at the helm. No one is on deck. No distress signal flies from the mast. For 2 hours, Morehouse watches, waiting for any sign of life. There is none. He orders his crew to launch a boat and investigate. What they find when they board the Mary Celeste would become the most enduring mystery in maritime history. A ship fully provisioned, seaworthy, with cargo intact and personal belongings untouched. But not a single soul on board. 10 people vanished, as if they were never there. The captain's log sits on the desk, the last entry dated 9 days earlier. The captain's watch hangs by his bed, still ticking. Crew's pipes lie where they left them. A half-eaten meal rests on a table. Everything is normal. Everything is perfect. Everything is wrong. Tonight, on Dark Evidence, we unravel the mystery of the Mary Celeste, the ghost ship that has baffled the world. What happened to Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, their daughter Sophia, and the 7 men who sailed with them? The boarding party from the Dei Gratia approached the Mary Celeste with caution. They'd heard stories of haunted ships, but what they found was stranger than any story. The ship was in excellent condition. The hull was sound. The sails were set, though some were torn. The cargo to 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol was intact and undisturbed. 6 months' worth of food and water in the hold. Personal belongings were scattered, but not stolen. The captain's watch still hung by his bed. But the ship's only lifeboat was missing. Every single person aboard, Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, their daughter Sophia, and 7 crew members, had vanished. No signs of violence, no blood, no struggle, no indication of what could have driven them to abandon a sound ship. Captain Morehouse, I have sailed the seas for 30 years. I have seen storms that would make a man weep. But I have never seen anything like this. A ship alive but dead. A vessel with everything a crew could need, but no crew to need it. It was as if the sea had swallowed them whole and left their ship as a tombstone. The men who vanished. To understand this mystery, you must first understand the people who lived it. Captain Benjamin Briggs was 37 years old, a seasoned mariner from Marion, Massachusetts. He had commanded other ships and made many successful voyages. He was known as a fair, pleasant man, deeply religious. A teetotaler who never drank alcohol. He was the kind of captain crews respected and owners trusted. His wife, Sarah Briggs, was 30 years old. She had sailed with her husband before and was comfortable at sea. She was accompanying him on this voyage along with their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Matilda. Their 7-year-old son, Arthur, remained behind with the captain's mother to attend school. A decision that would haunt the family forever. The crew consisted of 7 men, 2 Americans, 1 Dane, and 4 Germans. All had solid reputations and spoke good English. They were experienced sailors who had signed on for a routine crossing. Sarah's mother wrote, Sarah was happy, excited about the voyage. She said little Sophia loved the ship, loved watching the sailors climb the rigging. She said Benjamin was in good spirits, looking forward to Italy, to showing them the Mediterranean sun. She promised to write from Genoa. That was the last we ever heard. The letter that never arrived. Just before departing New York, Captain Briggs wrote a letter to his mother, dated November 3rd, 1872. It was full of optimism and plans for the future. He spoke of the cargo, the crew, his hopes for a successful voyage. He expressed his desire to see her and his little boy when the ship returned in the spring. It was not the letter of a man planning fraud or foul play. It was the letter of a man looking forward to life. That letter would become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. Proof that whatever happened, it was not planned. The ship with a curse. The Mary Celeste herself had a history before that fateful voyage. Built in Nova Scotia in 1861, she was originally named the Amazon. From the beginning, she seemed marked by misfortune. Her first captain died suddenly, just days into her maiden voyage. On subsequent trips, she was involved in collisions, suffered damage in storms, and gained a reputation as an unlucky ship. In 1867, she ran aground and was wrecked off Cape Breton. An American businessman, Richard W.N., bought the wreck, made extensive repairs, and renamed her the Mary Celeste. By 1872, she was fully restored, seaworthy, and ready for trade. But the question haunted those who knew her history. Was the ship cursed? Or was it just bad luck that followed her wherever she sailed? Next time on Dark Evidence. In Part 2, we examine the last known days of the Mary Celeste, the weather, the cargo, the final entry in the captain's log, and the 9 days between that entry and the discovery. 9 days when 10 people simply disappeared from the face of the earth. Dark Evidence, where the evidence tells the story, but the heart remembers. Subscribe now. November 7th, 1872. New York Harbor. The Mary Celeste slips her moorings and heads for the open sea. Captain Briggs stands at the helm, his wife beside him, their daughter playing at their feet. The crew goes about their duties. The cargo hold is packed with 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, destined for Genoa, its valuable cargo. The weather is fair, the ship is sound, the crew is capable. Everything is as it should be. For the next 2 weeks, the Mary Celeste sails east across the Atlantic. Captain Briggs keeps his log faithfully. November 25th, 1872, 8 a.m., the final entry. The log notes the Mary Celeste is within sight of Santa Maria. The weather is good. The ship is making about 6 knots. Everything is normal. That evening, Captain Briggs made his last entry. It read simply, "This morning, at 8, left at anchor. At 5, arrived at the entry, is incomplete." It trails off, as if interrupted. What happened next? No one knows. For 9 days, the Mary Celeste sailed on without her crew, drifting through the Atlantic until the day Gratia found her. 9 days, 216 hours. Time enough for 1,000 things to happen. Time enough for 10 people to disappear forever. One of the most important clues in the case lies in the cargo itself. Industrial alcohol is not the kind of alcohol people drink. It's methanol, toxic, volatile, and highly flammable. Fumes from leaking barrels could accumulate in the hold. If ignited, these fumes could cause a catastrophic explosion. When the cargo was delivered, 9 of the 1,701 barrels were empty. These 9 barrels were made of red oak, a more porous wood. Had these barrels leaked, had the hold filled with explosive fumes, could the crew have smelled danger and panicked? A maritime historian explains this theory. Alcohol fumes are heavier than air. They would have settled in the hold, invisible, odorless, in low concentrations. If the crew opened the hatch, The rush of fresh air could have created a combustible mix. One spark, and the ship could have gone up. But when the Dei Gratia's crew boarded the Mary Celeste, they smelled nothing. The hold was sealed, the main hatch still closed. If the crew had feared an explosion, why didn't they open the hatch to ventilate before abandoning ship? Why leave it sealed? The missing lifeboat. The most significant piece of physical evidence was the missing lifeboat. The Mary Celeste's only small boat was gone, along with its oars and some navigation equipment. This suggested the crew had left deliberately, not in panic, but with some measure of planning. But why leave a perfectly sound ship for a small boat in the middle of the Atlantic? The lifeboat was tiny, barely capable of holding 10 people in calm water. In rough seas, it would be a death trap. And yet, the lifeboat was gone, and so were the people. The rope, another clue. A rope was found fastened to the stern of the ship, its frayed end trailing in the water behind. It looked as if something, perhaps the lifeboat, had been towed behind the Mary Celeste and then broken free. Had the crew taken the lifeboat but kept it attached to the ship, hoping to return once danger passed? Had the rope snapped in rough seas, sending the lifeboat and its occupants drifting away into the vast Atlantic? The personal belongings. The Dei Gratia's crew found personal items scattered throughout the cabins. Clothing was strewn about. A sewing machine sat on a table. The captain's watch still hung by his bed. But valuables remained. Money was found in the cabins. The crew's pipes, essential items no sailor would willingly leave behind, were still in their quarters. These were not the signs of a panicked evacuation. These were the signs of people who expected to return. First Mate Oliver DeVoe, Dei Gratia. Testimony: the ship was wet below. There was 2.5 feet of water in the hold. That's not unusual for a ship at sea. The cabins were in order, though some things were moved about. The captain's bed had not been slept in. It looked as if they had left in haste, but not in terror. It looked as if they thought they'd be back. The blood that wasn't blood. Early newspaper reports described spots of blood found on the ship, on a sword, on the deck rails, on the cabin floor. These reports fueled speculation of violence, mutiny, or pirate attack. But when scientists later analyzed the spots, they found something else. The blood was actually rust. Iron oxide from the ship's metal fittings, mixed with the damp salt air of the Atlantic. The stains that had seemed so sinister were nothing more than the ordinary wear and tear of a ship at sea. The myth of blood on the Mary Celeste would persist for decades, adding to the legend of a ship haunted by violence. But the truth was far more mundane and far more mysterious. Next time on Dark Evidence. In Part 3, we examine the investigation, the Vice Admiralty Court in Gibraltar, the suspicion cast on the Dei Gratia's crew, the 3-month inquiry that found no answers, and the theories that began to emerge, some plausible, some ridiculous, all unproven. Dark Evidence, where the evidence tells the story, but the heart remembers. Subscribe now. The investigation, a deep and impenetrable mystery. December 22nd, 1872. Gibraltar, the Vice Admiralty Court. The Mary Celeste sits at anchor in Gibraltar Harbour, a ghost ship come to life. Around her, officials from the court, insurance agents, and curious onlookers gather to examine the vessel and debate her fate. The Dei Gratia's crew has brought her here to claim salvage rights, but the court is suspicious. The circumstances are too strange, too convenient. Some officials suspect the Dei Gratia's crew of foul play, of murdering the Mary Celeste's people and staging an abandonment to claim the reward. Frederick Sullyflood, Attorney General of Gibraltar, was convinced of their guilt. He examined the ship for days, looking for evidence of violence. He found the rust stains and called them blood. He found marks on the rails and called them sword cuts. He found a world of conspiracy in every shadow. But he found no bodies, no witnesses, no proof. For 3 months, the court investigated. They interviewed the Des Gratiers crew. They examined the Mary Celeste from bow to stern. They reviewed the cargo manifests, the logbooks, the personal effects. In the end, they cleared the Des Gratiers crew of any wrongdoing. The salvage award was granted, a fraction of the ship's value, but enough to acknowledge their role in recovering the derelict vessel. But as to what happened to the Mary Celeste and its missing people, the court could offer no conclusion. The case was marked unsolved and filed away. The newspapers have a field day. While the court deliberated, newspapers around the world filled the vacuum with speculation. Headlines screamed of pirates, mutiny, sea monsters, and supernatural forces. Every theory, no matter how outlandish, found a willing audience. The Boston Post, January 1873. It is now thought that the brig was seized by pirates in the latter part of November, and that after murdering the captain, his wife, child, and officers, the vessel was abandoned. The stories grew wilder with each telling. The Mary Celeste was becoming a legend. Arthur Conan Doyle weighs in. In 1884, 12 years after the disappearance, a young Scottish doctor named Arthur Conan Doyle published a short story in a London magazine titled J. Habakkuk. Jeffson's statement, it told the tale of a ghost ship found adrift in the Atlantic, its crew murdered by a vengeful ex-slave. Doyle based his story on the Mary Celeste, though he changed the name to Marie Celeste, a misspelling that would persist in popular culture for generations. His fictional account was so vivid, so compelling, that many readers mistook it for fact. The line between truth and fiction blurred forever. Conan Doyle later wrote, "I built a story around the facts, as any writer would. I never imagined it would become part of the legend. But the public wanted answers, and if reality wouldn't provide them, fiction would have to suffice." The Mary Celeste was no longer just a mystery. It was a myth. The theories multiply. Over the decades that followed, dozens of theories emerged to explain the disappearance. Each reflected the fears and fascinations of its time. The pirate theory. Pirates attacked the ship, killed the crew, and stole nothing. The cargo was untouched, the valuables remained, and the pirates vanished without a trace. It made no sense, but it made good headlines. The mutiny theory. The crew rose up against Captain Briggs, killed him and his family, and then fled in the lifeboat. But why leave behind their pipes, their belongings, their pay, and why no sign of struggle? The insurance fraud theory. Captain Briggs staged the disappearance to claim insurance money, but he left his wife and daughter to die. He abandoned his young son forever. The man who wrote that letter to his mother, full of hope and plans. He was not a man planning fraud. The seaquake theory. A sudden underwater earthquake shook the ship, damaging it, and terrifying the crew into abandoning. But such quakes are rare in the Atlantic, and they leave evidence. Cracked timbers, displaced cargo that was absent on the Mary Celeste. The waterspout theory. A waterspout, a tornado at sea, struck the ship, washing the crew overboard while leaving the vessel intact. Possible, perhaps. Proven. Never. The family's silence. Throughout it all, the Briggs family remained silent. Captain Briggs's mother, his brother, his surviving son, Arthur. They said nothing to the press, offered no theories, made no accusations. They grieved in private and waited for news that never came. Arthur Briggs' family letter, 1924. I was 7 years old when my father sailed away. I remember him lifting me onto his shoulders, promising to bring me a gift from Italy. I waited for years. I still wait, but I know now he's not coming back. He's with the sea, with my mother and my little sister, and the sea keeps its secrets. Arthur died in 1944, never knowing what happened to his family. Next time on Dark Evidence. In part 4, we examine the evidence that survived, the 9 empty barrels, the sealed hatch, the missing chronometer, and the most plausible theory yet, one that combines faulty equipment, bad luck, and a series of small mistakes that led to a catastrophic decision. Dark Evidence, where the evidence tells the story, but the heart remembers. Subscribe now. The cargo hold. When the Mary Celeste was finally unloaded in Genoa, inspectors made a startling discovery. Of the 1,701 barrels of alcohol, 9 were completely empty. Not leaking, not partially full, empty. These 9 barrels were different. They were made of red oak, a more porous wood than the white oak used in the rest. Red oak absorbs moisture, expands, and can allow liquids or fumes to escape. Had these barrels leaked, had the hold filled with invisible, explosive alcohol vapor, the sealed hatch. When the Dei Gratia's crew boarded the Mary Celeste, the main hatch was still sealed. If the crew had feared an explosion from vapor buildup, why wouldn't they open the hatch to ventilate? It was a simple, logical step, and they didn't take it. This single fact undermines the explosion theory. If they feared an imminent blast, they would have opened the hatch. They didn't. So either they didn't fear an explosion or something else happened. The missing chronometer. Among the personal effects left behind, one item was conspicuously absent. The ship's chronometer. This precision timepiece was essential for navigation, the only way to determine longitude at sea. Without it, finding your way across the Atlantic was nearly impossible. The chronometer was gone. So were the ship's papers, the registration, the bills of lading, the official documents. Someone had taken them. Someone had left in a hurry, but with enough presence of mind to grab the most valuable navigation tools, the lifeboat's fate. The lifeboat was never found. If it had broken free and drifted away, its occupants would have faced a terrible choice. Row toward land, hundreds of miles away, or drift and hope for rescue. Neither option offered much hope in the cold Atlantic of December. But if the lifeboat had been swamped by waves, its occupants would have died quickly, bodies lost to the deep, leaving no trace. That may explain why no remains were ever found. The 2007 theory. In 2007, a Smithsonian Channel documentary proposed a new explanation, based on a detailed re-examination of the evidence. The theory goes like this. The Mary Celeste's pumps were clogged with coal dust from a previous voyage. On November 25th, the ship encountered rough seas, causing it to take on water. Captain Briggs, checking the hold, noticed the water level rising and the pumps failing to work. At the same time, the leaking red oak barrels were releasing alcohol fumes into the hold. The combination of rising water and explosive vapor created a terrifying scenario. The ship might founder, or it might explode. Briggs made a fateful decision. He ordered everyone into the lifeboat, attaching it to the ship by a long rope. They would wait at a safe distance, watching to see if the ship exploded or sank. If it didn't, they could return, but the rope snapped. The lifeboat drifted away. The Mary Celeste sailed on without her crew. A maritime historian states, "It's the only theory that fits all the evidence. The empty barrels explain the fumes. The clogged pumps explain the water. The attached rope explains why they thought they could return. And the snapped rope explains why they never did." But even this theory has holes. If the crew feared an explosion, why didn't they open the hatch to ventilate? Why leave it sealed? If the pumps were clogged, why was there only 2.5 feet of water in the hold? This was a normal amount for a vessel at sea. And if the rope snapped, why was its end found frayed, trailing in the water? That suggests it had been under tension for some time, pulling against the moving ship. The missing chronometer remains the most puzzling clue of all. If the crew left in a panic, why take time to grab it? Those were in the captain's cabin, not on deck. Someone had to retrieve them deliberately. This suggests the abandonment was planned, at least to some degree. Captain Briggs, a seasoned mariner, knew that without a chronometer, he couldn't navigate. But perhaps he also knew that if the ship was in danger of exploding, navigation was the least of his concerns. The 2007 theory is compelling, but it's still just a theory. Like all the others, it relies on speculation, assumption, and educated guesses. The truth is, we may never know what happened on the Mary Celeste. The evidence is too thin, the witnesses too silent, the sea too deep. Next time on Dark Evidence, we examine the legacy, the ship's final years, the myths that grew around her, the families left behind, and the question that remains after 150 years: why does this mystery still haunt us? Dark Evidence, where the evidence tells the story, but the heart remembers. Subscribe now. The legacy, the sea keeps its secrets. 1885, Haiti, the final voyage of the Mary Celeste. 13 years after its disappearance, the Mary Celeste sails again, but not for long. Her new captain, Gilman C. Parker, has a plan: run the ship aground on the reefs of Haiti, claim the insurance money, and split the proceeds with his co-conspirators. The plan works. The ship is wrecked. But the insurance company investigates and discovers the fraud. Parker is prosecuted but dies before trial. The Mary Celeste lies broken, her secrets forever lost. The vacuum of truth. Why does the Mary Celeste mystery endure after 150 years? A disappearance of a ship is like a blank space, so we begin to fill it with narrative. It's a human compulsion to fill these blank spaces, and they change with our historical moment. In the 1870s, it was pirates and sea monsters. In the 1880s, Arthur Conan Doyle filled it with revenge. The 20th century brought Bermuda Triangle theories. The 21st century, science and logic. But the blank space remains, and as long as it does, we will keep trying to fill it. The family's legacy. The Briggs family never got answers. Arthur Briggs grew up without parents, always wondering what happened on that cold December day. He became a successful businessman, but he never spoke publicly about his family's tragedy. The Angel family, Sarah Briggs's relatives, also carried the weight of unanswered questions. Sarah's mother died in 1889, still waiting for news of her daughter. We grew up with this story. It was always there, like a shadow in the corner of the room. We knew that somewhere out in the Atlantic, our family vanished, and we'd never know why. The myth of Mary Celeste. One of the strangest legacies is the misspelling of the ship's name. Thanks to Arthur Conan Doyle, millions know it as Mary Celeste, rather than Mary Celeste. The error is widespread, with historical accounts using both names interchangeably. It's a fitting irony. Even the ship's name has been lost in the fog of myth. The most likely explanation. After 150 years of speculation, what is the most likely answer? The 2007 theory: leaking alcohol, clogged pumps. A snapped rope remains the most plausible explanation that fits the known facts. It accounts for the empty barrels, the sealed hatch, the missing lifeboat, and the frayed rope. It explains why the crew left in haste, but not panic. It explains why they took the chronometer but left their pipes. But it cannot explain why the ropes snapped. It cannot explain why the lifeboat was never found. It cannot explain why, if they survived in the lifeboat, no trace of them ever appeared. The theory is good, but it's not proof. And in the absence of proof, the mystery lives on. On December 4th, 1872, Captain David Morehouse of the Dei Gratia looked across the Atlantic and saw a ship that should not exist. A ship alive, but empty. A ship with food on the table, watches still ticking, pipes still waiting for absent lips. 10 people sailed on that ship. 10 people vanished from the face of the earth. Their names were Benjamin Briggs, Sarah Briggs, Sophia Briggs, and 7 crew members: Albert Richardson, Andrew Gilling, Edward Head, Volkert Lorenzen, Boy Lorenzen, Gottlieb Goodshod, and unknown. They left behind families, dreams, and a mystery that would outlive them all. More than 150 years later, we still don't know what happened. We have theories, we have guesses, we have stories, but we don't have the truth. The Mary Celeste sails on in our imagination, a ghost ship forever adrift, forever empty, forever waiting for answers that will never come. Dark evidence. If you've watched this series to the end, you've traveled through one of the greatest mysteries in maritime history. You've seen the evidence, weighed the theories, and felt the human cost of an unanswered question. And now, like everyone else, you have to decide for yourself what happened to the Mary Celeste. This is what dark evidence is about. Not easy answers, not comforting conclusions, just the facts, the stories, and the questions that remain. If you believe the truth matters, subscribe, hit the bell, share this video. Help us keep these stories alive. Dark evidence, where the evidence tells the story, but the heart remembers. Subscribe now.